everybody their lives have been changed because of technology. You know, we go around with our phones in our pockets. We can just connect across the globe. Even kindergartners can do that. And so what you said recently was, we want people to come here and talk about what's important to you about these changes with technology. And so if you can, it's so easy to come into a world like this, CybaLOUNGE. You don't have to have any knowledge of virtual worlds or a lot of high tech. You simply go to this website and you're here. And what's really cool about it is you have this sense that we're in it together, and we can discuss these big changes in our lives in communication right here with a real sense of being together.
Yes, so we would be delighted if several people would come in and chat with us at this time. And if you have some important topic to talk about in connection with using the internet for communication, and we would welcome a discussion, and perhaps, if you don't mind, we would be happy to make a video posting the discussion so that we can communicate in another way, a way that allows us to communicate more widely by videos.
We really have to open up our minds to how information comes in a lot of formats, not just physical formats. You know, especially when we hear about virtual reality on the horizon and all these virtual experiences that we can have. And we want them to be high quality. We want to understand what they are. So I think part of that is what we can talk about here. Education, libraries, and just basic communication in new ways.
Yes, and I was thinking one thing we might want to talk about is what is the connection between libraries and education. My own view is that libraries have, for very many years, been the main resource for adult education. And they probably should continue to be, but they're not going to continue in the brick and mortar sense, because most adults who want to get education are going to get it on the web. You have some ideas about how we might use that?
Exactly. I think libraries have always been important for education, and they've been community centers where we house and archive history through books and manuscripts, and that's really important. And now, of course, with them being online, we have databases online that are rich, full of great research and knowledge. But since we're not limited to a brick and mortar space that's the center of the town community, we can have communities that also can get together in virtual spaces. Because when you go online, you're lost in this sea of information. It's just a flood, and it's hard to find a community. And that's a reason why a virtual community can be important. It's the way to connect people with important information.
Yes, and now that you mentioned communities, we've often, when we mention communities, we often think in terms of some people in a neighborhood or nearby that can, well, nowadays can drive to a common place and meet with each other. But when we're on the web, we're not talking about that at all. Distance doesn't matter on the web. So we can talk about a community of interests, people who have a particular interest. In the olden world, people usually had a community of interest as well as a local community. But now we don't have to be local. We can have a community of some particular interest, and we could probably think about having a library somehow associated with it. And we know, of course, about Google communities. We make considerable use of Google communities because they're rather convenient for talking to each other about a common interest. Um, and we might think of having communities um, more widely spread, especially now that we can, well, communicate on the web and sort of almost in person. we get a sense of talking to each other, um, even though we are only our avatars are present, but um, we can think in we can think in terms of hmm, having a community such as um, meeting in a place like this. We can host.
Good point. I think those are, and there's just so many exciting things to think about being able to use that time. Book discussions, as you said, communities of interest, artists talking about how, new media formats that they can use for their art. We have communities on topics that are science related, people who are interested in genealogy. There's so many different reasons that people might want to get together and talk with experts as well as novices within the community.
Yes, so and of course, uh, if we have an ongoing community, that tends to attract experts, other people who would have something useful to say about how what the community can do, how the community can serve the interests of members. All would we know how to help them organize a library?
Absolutely, that's an essential question, and I think that's why librarians can help with that, because that's their background and their subject expertise, and learning how to adapt all of the core values and skills of librarianship into these new spaces. That's something librarians can help people understand the best way to do that. There's something for everybody in a space like this, but not everyone can be an expert on every single thing. So if we sort of pool our skills and our talents, that's the best way to move forward. So that's the challenge of the future really is that, sometimes there's too much information. Before the Gutenberg press, the problem was lack of access to information. Only the rich, could read. Now we have the opposite problem. Too much coming at us all the time. So we need to think about how we can design libraries and communities to find the information and connect with what they actually need.
Yes, and that would each community would need assistance in that, because the community may know what it wants to read about, but it doesn't know how to get a small access list that would be suitable as a for effective reading, successful reading, useful reading, and without the assistance, but it could be assisted by librarians.
Right, it's a good point. I think one person made the analogy of it's like trying to take a thimble to get the water out of Niagara Falls. You've got way too much coming at you.
Well, yes, of course, the water in Niagara Falls is pretty much all the same, so it really doesn't matter which batch
Right,
you get. But
right. If you
but
want,
the content on the internet, it varies a lot, and you don't want to spend time reading or even looking through and selecting the kinds of information the sources you want to use.
exactly.